So we're very privileged to have them both on stage. So everybody, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Alexander Newley and Juliet Cowan.
Thank you. So hi, Sasha. Oh, can you hear us?
Yeah.
I might sing. We might use.
How's that? Level?
Yes.
Good. How are you?
I'm not going to say hot because that's the obvious
Yeah, I know. It's very hot.
I'm hydrating massively, so I should be okay.
Yeah. So, Unaccompanied Minor, has anyone here read it? Yes, you did. I mean, it's an amazingly detailed tale of a sort of smorgasbord of childhood. There's kind of nearly everything in it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it so far?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was living through that childhood, I had no idea how extraordinary it was. It was only later that I realised that, shooting pool with Sonny Corleone and riding on a motorbike with Steve McQueen was quite extraordinary. And I thought, God, I've had all these incredible experiences because I grew up with these two very famous people in show business. And I began to feel almost an obligation to share this, treasure trove of incredible experiences. And that matured over time, and then I love to write, so it was, I think, only a matter of time before I got to it. And then I also wanted to tie in my work as a painter and how art and creativity was a kind of a golden thread that allowed me to negotiate what at times was a pretty challenging childhood.
Yeah.
Because there was so much chopping and changing and moving around as my parents chased business opportunities in London and Hollywood and New York and so on. So it was very much a gypsy childhood.
And it's amazing how a lot of your feelings about your childhood emerged through your painting.
Yes.
As if you almost discovered bits of your childhood through painting them.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think in many ways we're not always fully aware of how our childhood has shaped us. I mean, you can do a lot of talk therapy, obviously, but sometimes even that doesn't...
Which you have done.
A fair amount. But even that sometimes doesn't unlock it. It's only maybe when you go in and try and really write about it, or write poetry about it, or paint it, or act it out in drama, that you really connect emotionally with the childhood self. And so I think writing about it and the alchemy of turning childhood experience into painting really got me in touch with it on a deeper level than any sort of being on a couch.
And did writing a book do? I mean, because it's a really vivid book. The sense of being a sort of an at times very unsafe child is really powerful.
Yeah.
And were those memories kind of uncovered as you wrote it, or were they very real anyway? Or
I'd always had them. In fact, believe it or not, I tried to write the book when I was 18. And that was way too young to be writing a memoir. I mean, crazy, and in many ways quite arrogant to sit down and try. But I was just too young to master the material. I really needed a much longer perspective. And it was only when I was in, this is now about 10 years ago, I was in my studio in New York, and a writer friend came, and I was doing a series of paintings that was very autobiographical, and I put the paintings up and I was talking, and I just said, you should write about your paintings. And I thought, well, I've always wanted to write about my childhood. Maybe the paintings is the way in.
Yeah, they definitely kind of illustrate in every meaning of the word.
That's right.
How you experienced your childhood as an adult.
Yes. Yeah.
So that it's like a kind of here we are now, here we were then.
That's right.
An illustration.
And I used the first painting in the book is a self-portrait of me as I am now, with my childhood self. So it's actually me holding the hand of my 7-year-old self, confronting the viewer of the painting. And I just thought, in light of all that we've learned about child psychology in the past, 80 years, say, that it was time that a self-portrait reflected that new understanding. So I did that painting, and that painting is the front piece of the book, and it's really about the book, the way that the dynamic of the book is me really having a conversation with that childhood self. And I used quite often in the book the child as a first-person voice, very simple prose, very basic and innocently descriptive, to get me into the narrative.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, no, I found the writing very fruity and...
it's quite rich in places too,
But I mean, you know, I have this sort of image of you almost hiding under the bed of your childhood,
Yes.
cowering.
Yeah.
Although it was an amazing childhood in many ways,
Yes.
it was one where you were almost under attack. It felt the drama of being a child was very palpable.
Yeah. I mean, the brights were very bright, and the darks were pretty dark.
Yes.
I was given over to the care of a lady when I was about 6 or 7 who was a nanny. And many people in show business, of course, need nannies. And she was, shall we say, a very interesting character with issues herself, which she
very big bosoms.
Very big bosoms, yes. And she had a lot of body mass, which she used liberally on me as a punishment in terms of crushing and wrestling and all this stuff. But having said all of that, she was absolutely fascinating, a very interesting character, and I really, as much as wanting to create well-rounded, nuanced, three-dimensional portraits of my mother and father, who are very, very interesting people, I also wanted to make a portrait of her because she had as big an impact on me as they did.
She kind of was, I mean, she's quite monstrous in many ways.
Yeah.
But she sort of was the mother you'd sort of almost been looking for.
That's right. I mean, had it not been for her, there would have been no security whatsoever, because both my parents were in show business, and most people in show business, present company accepted, are kind of like children themselves.
No, you can say that. Fair enough.
It's arguable that, you know, it's very tough because as a creative artist you're very in touch with your own child and you have to give them a lot of attention, so suddenly when another child is introduced into your life there can be some conflict. And that was certainly the case with my parents. But so Sue came in and her whole brief was to take care of me, which was great.
And Tara, your sister.
Right. So suddenly my world was very controlled.
You seemed to be her kind of real project.
The problem was she fell, you know, we fell in love with each other, hook, line and sinker.
She reminds me a little bit, I know this is probably a weird thing to say, if you've ever seen Transparent, she reminds me a little bit
I didn't see
of son's babysitter who then became his lover.
Okay.
There's a kind of, you know, generosity of body and strange, you know, that strange push me pull you of a real maternal figure who's also...
Absolutely. And that was the odd thing, was she was in many ways my mummy for a while, but I was aware that she was employed. So there was a strange kind of, I wasn't quite sure what that meant.
So that was quite a big thing for you, the fact that she was employed. Did you feel that she perhaps wouldn't have chosen to do it if she weren't being paid, or is there
I don't think I ever went that far, but I was certainly aware that there was a tension between my mother and her as to how I should be taken care of.
Which the Carpenters really benefited from.
Yes, because they used to have these tremendous rows, the two of them. And then Sue would go and slam her door and listen to the Carpenters and reimagine.
As you do.
So in some ways that was gratifying, that I was at the centre of these two very powerful women trying to, you know, in terms of Sue thought I should be brought up one way, so. But we all came through it, smiling.
Yes, here we are, look, we're alive.
Yes.
And I mean, the picture of your mother is, you know, very much, for me as a mother, especially a mother who works in that field, her mothering seems to have been the victim of, you know, a very difficult world at that time for a woman in that industry.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you said that, because she was facing an enormously misogynistic industry. Yeah. And we're still seeing that now, and that's beginning to burn off and reshape itself, but very slowly. So Mum faced enormous odds, and I think she was really responsible for, blazing a trail for women in that business.
Definitely.
And then certainly in the 80s, when she took on the role of Alexis, she really broadened out and empowered women in a very amazing way. So, but my memories of her in the 70s were that she had a career in Hollywood in the 50s. She'd been in films like Land of the Pharaohs with Howard Hawks, and she made a big splash. And then she married my father and sort of fell into eclipse because he was such a big star.
But also you say in the book that he had requested that she stay at home and be a mother.
Yes.
I could feel the pull of you know, almost behind him going, yes, that's a brilliant idea, why don't you just stay at home and be a mother? And she couldn't,
Well, it's difficult when your best friends like Natalie Wood and Samantha Eggar are in the makeup show at 20th Century Fox in movies, and you're home with the kids. I mean, you want to get out there and be...
But even if they weren't there, I mean, it's quite difficult if that's not your forte.
It was never going to be her role to be the porridge-stirring mother at home staying. I mean, she was... It is her divine fate to be who she is.
JC,
JC. So, she is the most amazing woman. I mean, she really is an astonishing. What she's achieved is amazing. So, yeah.
And do you feel that you've sort of reconciled with her as a mother as you become an adult?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I think when you become a parent yourself, you realise how difficult it is, and getting it right is well-nigh impossible. So you do change.
When he was there, his loving seemed very present and very palpable.
Yes.
And amazingly fun and rich.
Yes, yeah.
And you talk a lot about his other issues, kind of what reads like sex addiction, I've got to say.
No question. Yes.
And drug addiction and alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
And you don't seem to feel in the book, although you talk about his absence a lot, that desperate need for him to have been different. You seem to be more accepting of him as the father he was when he was there, and the father he wasn't.
Well, this is where we need Jane to talk about mothers and sons.
She ain't here,
so we don't have that.
She's
resource.
absent.
But
She's
I
the
think
parent of this talk.
I think sons and mothers. That's a very complex thing.
Okay.
And there are lots of needs from son to mother for mirroring and a positive sense of emerging masculinity, to be very loved and very seen by the mother and so on. Father-son has its own complexity as well, but I think it's a bit more straightforward. What I'd say about my father is that...
Do you not think it's more about expectation?
Yes. I think traditionally there is mother love, there is father love. Mother love is a little more unconditional, shall we say, and father love is a little more conditional. And when you have those in balance, I think you have very positive parenting. My father, in my experience, it was almost flipped. Yeah, I mean, my father was very yummy, very emotionally available, and my mother was maybe a bit more demanding. So it was a reversal. But the thing about him, I absolutely adored him emotionally.
Yes, that's so good.
I think that's very clear in the book, because he was, I don't know how many of you know him or know his work, he was totally delicious and radiant and a genius, a true genius. And he had this ability to make everybody that he connected with, whether it was from the stage or in person, feel completely seen. And he was just a very special human being. And so to be his son and to grow up witnessing him on the stage, enthralling hundreds of people at a time, I felt like I was the son of a deity.
Did you?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I would get to go backstage afterward, and he would embrace me, and I was like, wow, I'm related to this volcano of a human being. And it was very heady stuff. And it was odd because even though he was this source of great attraction for many people, when he was with me, he was so present. I mean, he was so down to earth. And in the book, there's lots of, I think, me trying to evoke that sense of closeness.
Yeah, no, it really comes across.
But having said all of that, the downside of that was that he was kind of like a child himself. We'd go to the toy store, and he got more joy out of getting the big presents for me almost than I did, because he wanted to go home. So I was missing dad discipline. I entirely missed out on dad discipline, which was a shame.
Sue did provide
because the son really needs that.
Yeah. Sue was you say in the book, she was sort of your dad.
Exactly.
The dad that you've been missing.
Exactly. She was everything for a while. She was my whole world. So when she was suddenly wrenched out of the mix, she was suddenly fired like that. After being with me for 6 years, it was like a catastrophe. I mean, it was like a death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And she was fired because of something terrible.
Well, she continually overstepped her bounds.
Right.
I mean, I mentioned earlier all the fights that were going on. So finally, my mother had enough, and she sent her packing. Which is understandable. I mean, she did have issues. She did have problems.
Yeah. And as I came to the end of the book, I thought, this is the first part of a 3-part autobiography.
Yeah.
Because it was quite interesting. It made me think, obviously, I mean, we're talking about childhood now. Made me think about the possibilities of becoming a healthy adult.
Yes.
If you've had a childhood that was unhealthy in so many ways, like yours was.
Yes. I think everybody's a work in progress, ongoing until the end. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks, okay, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm complete, I feel that's a very rare experience. I mean, maybe
It's a joke.
but I think we're all works in progress, and the drive to keep growing is ever present. At least it should be in every life, or you begin to atrophy, I think.
Yeah.
But it's difficult because you have to, in order to grow, you have to accept your shortcomings and you have to be realistic about yourself. You have to be able to look at yourself without a Vaseline on the lens and really see it. So that's tough. You know.
Yeah.
I think that is the hallmark of any creative, interesting human being with a great, and having a sense of humour about yourself as well. Yeah.
What is the hallmark of creative?
Continuing to grow, continuing to search, to seek, to try and improve.
And do you think you may treat us to a bit of your adulthood?
You mean talk about where I am now in terms of writing about it?
Yeah, in terms of writing about it.
Well, I do want to write another book, but I'm being terribly circumspect about it because I don't want it to be like the first book. I want to give the reader a sense now, because I feel like I've given the reader a very particular experience of what happened to me, which in places they can relate to. But because the childhood was so extraordinary, maybe my experience wasn't that universal. So in the second book I want to explore aspects of my life that are maybe more universal, so the reader can take more away from it. Like, okay, so what can I take away from this book that I can learn about my life? So I'm taking longer to think about the structure of the second book.
Which will again be autobiographical, do you think?
Yes.
I mean, the thing, obviously, we don't all get to play Paul with Leone, but I mean, the sense of feeling a powerless child in a quite an unsafe, however glittery world, is, I think, universal, if that's the kind of child you were, especially, and which can happen everywhere.
I mean, the thing that I might have experienced here and there is, okay, this kid, he's just a poor little rich boy, and he's had all this extraordinary experience, and there's nothing really to complain about. I mean, there's a point to that, but I think we, in our sort of stiff upper lip culture, we may not fully experience some of the downsides in a way that's maybe creative and productive for us. And so it's always a tightrope walk when you're talking about your childhood, to acknowledge a certain amount of victimhood, but not too much that you get cast into the victimhood shadow, because that's a trap entirely. At the same time, you've got to acknowledge, yes, I was deeply hurt by that, and that has made my life now very difficult, because it's cast me in a pattern which I'm finding very difficult to break. So there's a balance to be struck between acknowledging pain and damage and not falling into victimhood, taking responsibility and moving forward and changing.
Which you really did try and do in the book. I think I mean, obviously you talk a lot about your parents and their work and how you felt about them. And you try and explain them. You really try and sort of advocate for them.
Yes.
In a way that is.
Well, you have to forgive. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
Because only by forgiving do you let go and realise they are just human beings with their problems and their difficulties. It's, again, I think the writing the book was therapeutic, certainly, and also dealing with the fallout from the book. What happened when the book came out?
What happened when the book came out?
Well, it changed the world around me, because I suddenly realised that there was a perception about me now, because I'd sort of taken a stand and been, shall we say, brave enough to talk about my childhood. So suddenly I was aware that I was perceived in a certain way, which wasn't entirely positive. And then, so that was very interesting to deal with that, and that gave me an insight into how the world works, and where we are in terms of child psychology and our own past and how we process our stories.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? Do you? I was going to say something. Do you? I mean, if you could have changed anything about your childhood, do you think you would have?
No. I think that's a trap, that thinking. I mean, I think you've got to be very grateful for your experience. You know. Again, Dad used to say to me, nothing's wasted. I firmly believe that. I mean, there are dreadful things that you go through, of course there are. But everybody goes, you know, life is full of very, very tough, challenging tragedies.
Yeah. And did you have a light bulb? Sorry.
Yeah, so no, I wouldn't change anything. In fact, if I had it to do again, I'd live it more deeply, with a greater sense of gratitude, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's maybe what was missing.
As you feel able to do more in your adult life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And did you have a light bulb moment of forgiveness for your parents?
Yeah, I think when I became a parent, certainly. Absolutely. As I said earlier, when I realised how difficult it was, and when I started to feel that conflict between inner child and outer child, which is inevitable.
Yeah, of course it is.
And so the inner child says, but wait, I never got that. I never got that kind of love and attention to you. So why should you give it away here when I haven't even got it from you first? You know?
Yeah.
So you really, you know, it's like that thing in an aeroplane where they say, you know, you've got to put the oxygen mask on you first, even before putting it on your child, and that's in some ways counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But you do have to. I know it's a platitude that comes out of California, but you've got to love yourself first before you can love anything, even a child. It's got to come through you first. You know?
And do you feel that you're a work in progress in that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And how did you feel, because you know Joan Collins is an amazing woman, how did you feel about the kind of sexiness of her work? Did that impact on you as a...
Yes. I remember her, she came to me once, this is what, 72, 74, and she'd just done a Playboy centerfold. And I was 10. And she came to me in tears, and she said, Sasha, I've just done this magazine, and it's in this magazine, I have to put my clothes up. And she was crying. She said, I feel terrible about this. And how do you feel about this? And I, obviously on a reflex, said, don't worry, Mummy, that's fine. You've got to do, you know, then...
Did you know what it was?
Yeah, yes.
Did you see it?
I didn't see it. I did later on, when I was a bit older, when it was occasionally my habit to look at those magazines. I did find there was one issue where she was in the famous image of her. I think I must be one of the few children in the history of mankind to have watched both parents disrobe on screen and get it on, you know, in separate movies. It was quite an extraordinary thing. Weird. And at the time, I didn't think it was strange. Now thinking back on it, of course it's strange, and I must have tweaked me in some way, you know. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean... Yeah, go on.
Anyway, I think to continue writing about it is necessary to just...
No, well I did, as I say, I definitely see part 2 arriving.
Yeah.
And... I just wanted to talk a bit more about, so you went to a psychotherapist when you were a child.
Yes.
And that seemed also for you to be quite a safe space with the snake paintings.
Yeah, I mean, I had a wonderful child psychologist who was very into art therapy. And when I first went in to see her, she said, Sasha, tell me about yourself. And I said absolutely nothing. I was like, there's no way I'm going to talk to this woman at all. And so she eventually gave up on me, but she said, I'm leaving you with some crayons and some paper, and I'm just going down the hall to, you know, do a little bit of work. So she left me alone in the office with the crayons and the paper. And I had 45 minutes just sitting there as the clock ticked. So I thought, well, I'll do some drawing. So I started drawing, and I kind of got into it. And the woman was a genius, because when I came back for my next session, the drawing I'd done was up on the wall. And she said, I really like, why don't you do some more? And so for all of my sessions, I would come there. She wouldn't even be in the room. There would just be fresh pencils, fresh paper. And slowly, her office, she wallpapered it with my drawings. So I felt completely seen and accepted. It was my first art exhibition
Yeah.
at the age of 7 or 8. And I was very into reptiles at the time. I had this great big book on lizards and snakes, which is a kind of boyish thing. So I just drew, I drew snakes, exclusively snakes of all kinds of different...
Freud would have a few.
Yeah, Freud would, yeah, obvious now to me what was going on. So that really helped me, and it made that first connection for me between creative expression and feeling good, because when I was in Mrs. Benet's office, I felt great. I knew she was going to love the drawing, she was going to put it up on her wall, and it was very, very affirming for me. And so I do a lot of art teaching now, and I'm constantly trying to make that connection between art and joy and a sense of power, which I have, which I think is a wonderful...
I wrote down this quote.
Yeah.
Facing things in paint.
Yeah, facing things
So
in paint.
you
Yeah.
almost came kind of face to face with your own feelings about your life through your painting.
I do. I think and I also believe in a collective subconscious. So you're not only processing the stuff from your life, but you also have access to levels of experience that are common to us all. You know, it's Jung's collective unconscious. So, and I think artists are fairly lucky in having access to that. So I did go through a period in my painting where I was painting fairly ugly, difficult stuff.
Yeah.
It's a body of work that I have not been able to sell.
No.
But a very important and necessary body of work for me, and there's a lot of grotesque in it, there's a lot of monstrous stuff in it, but it was a very interesting purge that I had to go through. And I revisited the Mrs. Benet experience with the snakes, because I went through a whole period of, as an abstract painter when I was in my late 30s, using snake serpentine forms.
Consciously?
No, not initially. Subconsciously I was connecting with the kid again, and it was a wonderful reconnection, very powerful, and for 2 years I just made these big paintings full of these. And then I realized that this is what is called Kundalini Energy in Eastern thought philosophy. It's the serpent energy that lies coiled at the base of the spine. You lift up the chakras. It's the only energy that can open up the chakras and ultimately open up the crown chakra, which is the ultimate moment of enlightenment. So the serpentine energy is very important. To hit back at Freud's rather reductionist.
Shut up, Freud. We're not your fans.
interpretation
Come on.
of it.
It's all over for you.
Yeah.
And Parenthood. So did Parenthood kind of make you revisit your own childhood, or?
Yes, it did. I did it with the wrong person.
Okay.
Disaster.
Are you talking about the child or the
the lady in
Yeah.
question. But I have a wonderful daughter who is incredibly creative herself, and we did a lot of drawing together when she was young, so she's made the connection, and she has her own space where she can draw and feel, yes, that's me, and so she's very anchored in that sense, so I'm very pleased about that. Yeah.
And were there things about you as a parent that made you revisit your childhood?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the discipline problem.
Okay.
My father, my father was, shall we say, a narcissistic parent in the sense that he didn't want to be disliked by his child. So, he didn't want to run the risk of being too much of a disciplinarian because he couldn't handle the child not liking it. And I think this is something that afflicts parents who are not present all the time.